The Imperium of Man has been fighting a war on every front for over 10,000 years, and it hasn't lost yet. Not because it has the best technology, not because it has the smartest generals, but because it has more guns than there are stars in the galaxy. Today I'm breaking down every Imperial weapon in Warhammer 40K, from the cheapest piece of equipment a guardsman gets handed before he dies, to the weapon that kills entire planets, starting with one you already know by its nickname, the laser gun. The 40K community calls it a flashlight, and honestly, that's fair. One laser gun shot isn't going to ruin anybody's day. It fires a coherent beam of light that can punch through flesh and light armor at roughly 300 meters, which sounds decent until you remember that everything in this universe is either wearing ceramite plating or is literally a fungus the size of a refrigerator. But here's the thing, the laser gun was never designed to be powerful. It was designed to be infinite. Over 15 known patterns exist across the Imperium, each one cheap enough to arm entire planetary populations and throw them into a meat grinder without thinking twice about the budget. The charge packs can be recharged using vehicle engines, campfires, or just leaving them in direct sunlight. You can't break the logistics chain because there basically isn't one. And that's the point. One laser gun is a joke. A billion of them is a mathematical certainty. The Imperium doesn't need each shot to kill. It needs each shot to exist, because when you fire a trillion beams of light at a problem, the problem stops being a problem. The laser gun is the absolute baseline of Imperial firepower, and it still kills worlds through sheer volume, but the weapon that comes next, that one was designed to kill everything it touches on purpose. The bolter. So, the Imperial Guard gets a flashlight. Space Marines get a fully automatic grenade launcher disguised as a rifle. That's the gap we're working with here. The bolter fires .75 caliber mass reactive rounds. Let me break that down. Each bullet penetrates armor, burrows into the target, and then detonates from the inside. These aren't bullets, they're tiny missiles with anger issues. A single round can shred flesh, bone, and organs in one hit. Concentrated fire can chew through a light vehicle plating like it's cardboard, and it doesn't fire slow. The bolter can cycle up to 1,200 rounds per minute in rapid fire, with an effective range exceeding 300 meters. So you're looking at a weapon that launches exploding slugs at a rate that would make most modern machine guns jealous, and it does it accurately at 3 football fields away. But here's the thing that really sells the insanity of this weapon. A normal human physically cannot fire it. The recoil alone would shatter your arms, your shoulders, probably your spine. This isn't a side effect, it's the design philosophy. The bolter was engineered specifically for the superhuman physiology of a space marine. It is a transhuman weapon built for transhuman soldiers, and if you're anything less than 8 feet of genetically modified killing machine, it will destroy you before it destroys the enemy, which is, not ideal. Now, fans have argued for decades about whether bolter rounds are truly gyrojet stabilized or use conventional propellant, and honestly, the lore has flip-flopped across editions so many times that nobody has a definitive answer. I don't know what to tell you, but at least the bolter keeps its violence at range. The next weapon on this list requires you to get uncomfortably close. The chainsword, or someone at the Imperium looked at a sword and said, what if it was also a chainsaw? And then everyone just went with it. The chainsword is exactly what it sounds like. A blade lined with monomolecular teeth spinning at over 4,000 revolutions per minute, typically between 60 and 90 centimeters long, powered by fuel cells or energy packs, and designed to rip through the standard armor like it's wet cardboard. This is not a precision weapon. There's zero finesse involved. You rev it, you swing it, and whatever's in front of you stops being a problem. It works through sheer aggression and momentum, built specifically for close quarters combat where the goal is an elegant swordsmanship. The goal is making the other guy wish he'd stayed home. Here's the thing that makes it even better. The chainsword's design dates back to the dark age of technology, meaning humanity invented motorized chainsaw swords long before the Imperium even existed. The Emperor didn't commission this thing. Some ancient human engineer thousands of years before the Great Crusade looked at the available options and decided the best melee weapon was a screaming chainsaw blade, which is, a very normal and healthy engineering decision that says a lot about humanity as a species. Now, fans have debated the practicality of this thing for decades. The teeth would jam constantly. Maintenance would be a nightmare. One chunk of dense ceramite gets caught in the chain and suddenly you're holding an expensive metal stick, and every single one of those criticisms is completely valid. Nobody cares. The chainsword isn't practical. It's terrifying. And in a galaxy where morale wins battles just as often as firepower, a screaming soldier running at you with a revving chainsaw sword is worth more than 100 elegant blades. The Imperial Imperium doesn't need efficient, they need the enemy to break and run. But if you think a motorized chainsaw blade is the peak of Imperial melee weaponry, wait until you see what happens when you add a power field. The power sword. If the chainsword is a bar fight, the power sword is a duel. And in a galaxy where most soldiers are literally disposable, the fact that this weapon exists at all tells you something important about the person holding it. A power sword is an energized blade surrounded by a disruptive force field that fluctuates at frequencies capable of shearing through ceramite armor and reinforced plasteel like it's wet cardboard. The blade itself produces a distinctive glow, blue, green, or red depending on the make and pattern, which means you can see the guy about to kill you from across the battlefield. Subtle it is not. But here's the thing, you don't just pick one of these up off a dead guy and start swinging. Power swords require a charge pack and regular maintenance to keep that energy field stable. This is a precision instrument. Hand it to a standard guardsman and you've basically given a toddler a lightsaber. Exciting for about 3 seconds, then someone loses an arm, and that's exactly the point. Power swords aren't mass-produced for the rank and file, they're earned. Imperial officers receive them as marks of rank and personal achievement, which means in a universe of 10 trillion expendable bodies, carrying a power sword is the Imperium's way of saying this one matters. That's a rare distinction when your government views you as a line item on a logistics spreadsheet. The community has argued for years that power weapons should be significantly more devastating on the tabletop. In lore, these things trivialize infantry armor entirely. One swing and you're in 2 pieces, regardless of what you're wearing. On the table, they're good but not apocalyptic, which feels like a missed opportunity, honestly. Still, whether the rules do it justice or not, the power sword remains one of the most iconic sights in 40K. Elegant, lethal, and reserved for the few who've survived long enough to deserve one. But elegance only gets you so far when you need to melt a tank. That's where things get really hot. The melt-a-gun. Every weapon we've covered so far lets you shoot at something from a reasonable distance. The melt-a-gun does not believe in reasonable distances. Its effective range is roughly 12 meters. That's not a typo, 12 meters. You could throw a rock further than that. Here's what you get for closing that gap. The melt-a-gun fires superheated plasma bolts exceeding 900 degrees Celsius, capable of melting through over 4 inches of solid armor plating in a single shot. Tanks, bunkers, bulkhead doors, it doesn't matter. If it's in front of the barrel, it stops existing. The weapon literally liquefies whatever it touches. There is no damage state. There is only was there and is now soup. But here's the thing, to use it, you have to walk up to a battle tank that can see you. A battle tank with guns. A battle tank that is presumably not thrilled about your intentions. 12 meters is close enough to read the serial number on the hull. It's close enough that the crew inside can hear your boots on the ground. And you have to stand there, point this thing at the thickest part of the armor, and pull the trigger knowing full well the explosion you're about to cause is happening close enough to take you with it. This is why melt-a-guns are issued to dedicated tank hunting teams and nobody else. The ammunition is volatile, expensive, and in limited supply because the Imperium doesn't waste resources arming every grunt with a weapon that requires a death wish to operate. You give it to the soldiers who either have extraordinary courage or who the command structure has already mentally written off. There's not a lot of middle ground there. The melt-a-gun is the most devastating anti-armor weapon an infantryman can carry. It also has the life expectancy of a fruit fly attached to it, which is, not ideal. But if the melt-a-gun kills you by making you get too close, the next weapon kills you just for having the audacity to pull the trigger. The plasma gun. Every weapon we've covered so far has a downside. The laser gun is weak. The chainsword requires you to be in hugging distance. The melt-a-gun demands you sprint toward the thing you're trying to kill. But the plasma gun? The plasma gun's downside is that it might just vaporize you instead. Here's how it works. The plasma gun fires superheated ionized gas at an effective range of about 24 meters. That's double what the melt-a-gun gives you, and the damage output is devastating. We're talking bolts of star-hot material that can punch through heavy armor, melt through ceramite plating, and cause significant area damage on impact. For infantry portable firepower, nothing else in the Imperial arsenal touches it at range. But here's the thing, the Imperium doesn't fully understand how plasma technology works. Nobody does. This is ancient tech, old even by the standards of a civilization that worships machines. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains these weapons through a combination of actual engineering and what can only be described as religious ceremony. They chant over them. They anoint them with sacred oils. They perform rites of activation passed down for thousands of years. years, and nobody alive can tell you which steps are mechanically necessary and which are just tradition. They do all of them anyway, because the one time you skip a step might be the time your gun turns into a small sun in your hands, and that's not hyperbole. Plasma guns overheat catastrophically. Full detonation, cooking the operator alive in a burst of ionized gas. Every guardsman who picks up a plasma gun knows there's a real chance they die not to the enemy, but to their own weapon. The Imperium's official position on this is essentially acceptable losses, because nothing else cracks heavy armor that reliably at range. The community has debated for years whether the tabletop even punishes overheating enough. In the lore, pulling that trigger is genuinely terrifying. On the table, it's a mild inconvenience, but at least the plasma gun only kills you by accident. The next weapon on this list kills everything in front of you very much on purpose. The flamer. Every weapon we've covered so far is designed to kill. The flamer is designed to make you wish you were already dead. There's a difference, and the Imperium knows exactly what that difference is worth. The concept is simple. You take a tank of promethium, strap it to some poor soldier's back, and let them spray a stream of burning fuel up to 15 meters in a cone about 3 meters wide. Temperatures are high enough to ignite virtually anything on contact. Flesh, cloth, light vehicle plating, the hopes and dreams of whatever orc warband just charged your trench line. All of it burns. But here's the thing, the flamer isn't really about the body count. It's about what happens to the guys standing next to the body count. Watching your squad mate get turned into a screaming torch does something to morale that a clean laser gun shot never will. The Imperium figured this out centuries ago and leaned into it hard. The flamer is one of the few weapons in the entire Imperial arsenal that was specifically engineered for psychological impact first, lethality second. They don't just want you dead, they want you running, and it works. Mass infantry formations, Tyranid swarms, cultist hordes, none of them hold formation when the guy in front becomes a column of fire. The terror of burning alive is apparently a universal constant across every species in the galaxy. Good to know. Now, the obvious downside. You're carrying a pressurized tank of hyper-flammable fuel on your back into a war zone where people are shooting at you. One stray round to that tank and you become the weapon, which is, not ideal. Every flamer operator is essentially a walking bomb who just hasn't gone off yet. Fans have argued for years that the tabletop rules never properly reflect what the flamer actually does in the lore. On paper, it's underwhelming. In the novels, it's a war crime with a trigger, but if fire is the Imperium's answer to fear, then raw kinetic devastation is its answer to everything else. The Thunder Hammer. This is the ceiling, the absolute limit of what one warrior can carry into battle and still call it a melee weapon. The Thunder Hammer is the Imperium's answer to a question nobody sane would ask. What if we made a sword but it hit like artillery? The weapon head alone weighs over 12 kilograms. That's just the head, not the shaft, not the power supply, not the grip. Just the chunk of electroactive metal at the business end. A normal human can barely lift this thing, let alone swing it, which is exactly why it's almost exclusively wielded by Space Marines. Because the Imperium looked at the design specs and said, yeah, this is a transhumans only kind of problem. Here's how it works. On impact, the electroactive metals in the hammerhead discharge a massive burst of electrical energy directly into whatever you just hit. So you're not just getting the kinetic force of a superhuman slamming 12 plus kilograms of metal into your chest plate. You're also getting the electrical equivalent of a lightning strike at point blank range at the same time, which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets genuinely ridiculous. The strikes generate shockwaves that damage targets beyond the point of impact. You don't even have to hit someone directly. Standing near the guy who gets hit is enough to ruin your entire week. It's a melee weapon that functions like an area of effect blast. One swing can crack open an armored vehicle. There is no conventional defense against this. Shields fail, armor crumples. The combination of raw kinetic force and energy discharge overwhelms basically everything. Competitive players have argued for years that invulnerable saves shouldn't even apply to Thunderhammer hits, because mechanically, nothing should survive contact with this thing. The community can't agree on it, but honestly, the lore backs them up. After this, personal weapons stop making sense. If you want more firepower than a Thunderhammer, you need a vehicle. And that's exactly where we're headed. The less cannon. We've officially left the realm of what one person carries into battle. Everything up to this point could be strapped to a soldier and pointed at the enemy. The less cannon. Not so much. This is where platforms take over and individual soldiers stop mattering. Think of it this way. Remember the lasgun from the very beginning of this video? The one everybody calls a flashlight? The lascannon is that same basic technology, coherent light, scaled up to the point where it kills tanks. Same family, completely different attitude. The lasgun singes armor. The lascannon punches through fortified bunker walls. That's one hell of a growth spurt. The weapon fires a concentrated beam of laser energy with devastating range. We're talking well beyond what most conventional weapons can touch. You could hit a target so far away, you'd need binoculars just to confirm it exists. This makes it one of the Imperium's go-to platforms for anti-armor work, cracking open vehicles at ranges where the crew inside doesn't even know they're being targeted. It's also brutally effective against heavy infantry, punching clean through plating that would laugh off bolter rounds all day. But here's the thing, you don't just pick one of these up. The Cannon requires a dedicated power source to function, which is why it's almost exclusively crew-served or vehicle-mounted. 2 guardsmen hauling the thing around on a tripod is about as portable as it gets, and even then they need a power pack the size of a small suitcase. Not exactly pocket-sized. The mounting options, though, are everywhere. Sentinel walkers carry them. Land raiders carry them. Fixed defensive emplacements carry them. Basically, if the Imperium builds something with a flat surface and a power supply, someone's bolting a las cannon to it. It's the universal answer to the question, what if that thing over there wasn't alive anymore? The las cannon is the bridge. Infantry weapons on one side and true vehicle armament on the other. And speaking of vehicle armament, the next weapon doesn't just sit on a tank. It defines what a tank is, the battle cannon. Everything we've covered so far can be carried by a person. Maybe a very large, genetically enhanced person, but a person nonetheless. The battle cannon is where we leave human scale behind entirely. This is the main armament of the Leman Russ, the Imperium's primary main battle tank, and the absolute backbone of Imperial armor doctrine. If the lasgun is the weapon that wins wars through volume, the battle cannon is the weapon that wins wars through making the other side's buildings stop existing. It fires 120mm shells capable of leveling fortified positions at ranges well beyond what most enemies can effectively return fire from. Ammunition types include high explosive for turning infantry formations into memories, armor piercing for cracking open enemy vehicles like tin cans, and a variety of specialty rounds for when you need something more creative than just explosion. But here's the detail that really sells how absurd this weapon is. The battle cannon requires dedicated recoil compensators built into the tank chassis just to keep the vehicle from destroying itself every time it fires. The gun is so powerful that without those engineering countermeasures, the recoil would rip the Leman Russ apart from the inside. You need a machine specifically designed to survive its own weapon, which is, not ideal from a design philosophy standpoint, but extremely on brand for the Imperium, and this isn't even the ceiling. The battle cannon is the standard, the baseline of Imperial armored firepower, because the Imperium also fields super heavy tanks like the Baneblade, which mounts a cannon that makes the battle cannon look like a sidearm, and the Shadow Sword, which carries a volcano cannon originally designed to kill Titans. The Leman Russ is just what they consider normal, the everyday option. Grab one of the regular tanks, we don't need anything fancy today. Sustained bombardment from a line of Leman Russ tanks can reduce fortified positions to rubble. Walls, bunkers, defensive emplacements, all of it just gone. And that's the standard issue stuff before anyone calls in the big guns. But ground base is the key phrase there, because once we leave the planet's surface, the scale of Imperial weaponry stops making any kind of reasonable sense. The Nova Cannon. Everything we've covered so far operates on a scale you can wrap your head around. Kilometers, maybe tens of kilometers. Weapons that destroy buildings, vehicles, fortifications, even entire battlefields. The Nova Cannon doesn't care about any of that. The Nova Cannon operates at a scale where planets start becoming relevant units of measurement. This is a spinal-mounted weapon system on Imperial warships. And when I say spinal-mounted, I mean the ship is literally built around the gun. The entire vessel, from bow to stern, exists to point this thing at something and pull the trigger. Heavy cruisers and above are the only ships that can even carry one, because the power generation requirements are so enormous that smaller vessels would drain themselves dead just trying to charge it. And what does it fire? Massive shells carrying thermonuclear warheads at effective ranges exceeding 100,000 kilometers. For context, that's roughly a quarter of the distance from the Earth to the Moon. You could fire this thing from one side of a planet and hit something on the other side of a completely different planet. The battle cannon we just talked about was impressive at 48 kilometers. The Nova Cannon laughs at that number and multiplies it by over 2,000. Here's the thing, a single volley from this weapon can destroy enemy capital ships, ships that are themselves kilometers long, ships carrying thousands of crew members, ships that took decades or even centuries to build. One shot, gone, reduced to expanding clouds of superheated debris drifting through the void, which is, not ideal if you're on the receiving end. The Nova Cannon occupies this fascinating space in Imperial doctrine where it's simultaneously the ultimate expression of overwhelming force and a weapon of absolute desperation. When a fleet commander authorizes its use, it means one of two things. Either the battle is about to be won in spectacular fashion, or everything has gone so catastrophically catastrophically wrong that vaporizing entire sections of space is the only remaining option. There's no middle ground with this weapon. It doesn't do moderate. But here's what should genuinely unsettle you. The Nova Cannon is only number 11 on this list. A weapon that can erase capital ships from existence across distances that dwarf planetary diameters. And there's still one thing above it. Because the Imperium looked at ship-killing nuclear artillery and said, what if we aim bigger? And by bigger, I mean entire planets. Cyclonic torpedoes. Everything we've talked about so far, every weapon from the humble lasgun to the Nova Cannon, operates under one shared assumption, that the thing you're shooting at is worth keeping. The ground beneath your feet, the air in your lungs, the planet you're standing on. All of it has value. All of it is worth preserving. Cyclonic torpedoes abandon that assumption entirely. These are orbital strike weapons carrying multiple thermonuclear warheads fired from Imperial warships in high orbit, designed to do one thing and one thing only: kill a planet, not conquer it, not pacify it. Kill it. Penetrate the planetary shields, burn through the atmosphere, and systematically destroy every living thing on the surface. Oceans boil, continents crack, populations measured in billions drop to zero. The biosphere doesn't collapse, it ceases to exist. This is the weapon of Exterminatus. And here's what makes it the most terrifying entry on this entire list. It's not the yield, it's not the kill count, it's what the deployment means. A cyclonic torpedo launch is an official Imperial admission that a world is lost, that every soldier sent to defend it died for nothing, that every civilian living on it has been reclassified from Imperial citizen to acceptable loss. The Imperium looked at a planet full of its own people and decided that deleting it from existence was the better option than letting the enemy have it. In a civilization that already treats individual human lives as expendable ammunition, that decision carries a weight nothing else in the setting can match. The technical specifications, deliberately vague. The Imperium doesn't publish the details of how it kills your world. It doesn't want you to understand the mechanism. It just wants you to know with absolute certainty that it can, and it will. The order comes from an Inquisitor or a chapter master, and there is no appeal process, no evacuation fleet, no second chances, and that's the Imperium of Man in a single weapon. We started this video with a lasgun, a mass-produced laser pointer handed to a conscript who will never be remembered, fighting in a war he doesn't understand, on a world that high command might not even bother to name. That soldier doesn't matter. His weapon barely matters. He is one body in a meat grinder that spans an entire galaxy. And we end here, with a weapon that proves it's not just the soldiers who don't matter, entire planets don't matter either. Billions of lives, centuries of history, whole civilizations built and maintained across generations, all of it reduced to a charred rock drifting through space because someone in a warship decided it was the efficient call. From one soldier's flashlight to the death of worlds. That's the Imperial Arsenal. That's the Imperium of Man. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.